That is the unmistakable sound of a Formula One race car racing by, and racing by real fast. An F1 car can hit speeds of over 220 miles per hour, which, okay, that's impressive, but just as impressive is how quickly an F1 team can complete a pit stop. Because when a car has to pull in to make a change, every second, every fraction of a second matters. So pit crews train to get these stops down to just a few seconds. And in 2023, the McLaren F1 team earned a Guinness World Record for the fastest pit stop. It was exactly 1.8 seconds long, or short, depending on how you want to think about it. This incredible moment happened when driver Lando Norris entered the pit during a Formula One race in Qatar. McLaren has a video of it on YouTube. I put a link to it in the show notes to this episode. And it's hard to describe the perfect choreography playing out in that pit stop. Everything happens so fast. The first few times I watched it, the car was pretty much driving away by the time my brain could even process what was actually going on.
You're right. The video is incredible. It's just like it's a piece of art, just how it just kind of, the car flows in, the moment just happens and the car just goes. And it's just, when I saw it live, I was like, I've never seen something so quick in my life.
On race day, Dan Keyworth wasn't in the pit for those 1.8 seconds. But he plays a critical role in helping make sure a moment like that can happen in the first place.
I'm Dan Keyworth. I'm the Director of Business Technology, and I'm responsible for all the tech that we use across McLaren to go racing.
I'm wondering if you can help set the scene for us as we kind of come up to that pit stop. Why is your driver, Lando Norris, about to come in for a pit stop? Can you take us back?
Yeah, well, first, a pit stop can happen multiple times in a race, depending on what circuit you go to. And it's as much as a driver's race as it is a tyre race as well. Tyre starts to wear as you get through the race, and there'll be kind of a pre-game strategy as to what tyre set you may choose to go as a team. So as the car comes into the pit, that is the moment that we're changing all 4 tyres at a given time. You got 16 people around the car. So you've got a front and rear jackman, and then you've got all of the other people around the car doing things. So changing the tyres, but also changing things like pneumatic pressure. And that all has to happen in 1.8 seconds if you want to hit a world record.
Just to reiterate, 1.8 seconds. It's a great example of what happens when a team pushes every person and every tool to the limit.
And I think we're at that space with pit stops now that there is so much information around that very short moment that actually we now rely on things like AI to interpret that.
I'm Matthew Braga, and this is Working Smarter, a podcast from Dropbox about how AI is changing the way we work, how we get stuff done, and how races are won. Working Smarter is supported by Dropbox Dash, the universal search and knowledge management tool from Dropbox. In fact, the team at McLaren uses Dash across their whole commercial organization. Later in this episode, you'll hear Dan Keyworth talk about how Dash helps them win races. Go see how Dash can turbocharge your own work. Head to workingsmarter.ai/dash or tap the link in the show notes. Now, imagine if your job worked anything like the jobs at a racetrack. A job in which you have just seconds to make critical decisions, and you have the power of AI to give you an edge. At McLaren, machine learning tools don't only power record-setting pit stops and lap times, they also help their office teams work smarter. But let's start this off at the racetrack, where the tech-backed path to the podium begins long before any racer revs their engine.
You don't win a world championship or a race through one moment. You win it through the consistency and the application of consistency over a longer period of time. So, we've got to get them totally dialed into those moments. We talk about the 16 people that are surrounding the car. Actually, there's 1,300 people that input into that process, whether it's, the design of how the tyre comes on and off the car, and that's done back in the design team in the factory, through to the finance team that are funding all of the equipment, as well as all the R&D guys that are thinking of different technologies inside the regulations that you can use around a pit stop. And then, the wheel guns have got to come to the party as well and make sure that they can do their job in the hands of the, very talented pit crew. So all that effort kind of goes in, including the human performance side. These guys are athletes, and we've got to make sure that they are flexible and that that they are used to and getting the right muscle memory in place all the time to do these changes over and over again and do it consistently.
How do you do that? Like how much of a feat is involved in getting someone to the point where, a pit stop doesn't take 2.3 seconds, it takes 1.8 seconds?
Yeah, there's multiple factors. There's a mindset thing that the team have got to be in the right frame of mind, and it's all about being one team when that moment happens. I'm a little bit biased as the technology guy because there's so much technology that goes into these scenarios. We put a lot of focus on human performance, biomechanical analysis, video analysis. So the guys, a bit like a quarterback in the NFL, is looking constantly at every single time I threw the ball, where did it go and where did it land and how close were I to the hands. It's very similar for pit stop guys. So they just want to, constantly be looking over and over again, like, have I hit my marks? Did I get it in the time expectations of the team, et cetera, et cetera? How did I compare to the rest of the crew around the car? And we obviously have to rely on a huge amount of technology and data to give us that insight in real time, but also in post-analysis as well.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit? And in particular, I'm wondering not just data, but also how AI comes into the equation to pull something off like that.
Yeah, I think, to begin with, when you start out with applying technology into this space, very transactional. It's, film the whole thing and then just review it slow time. But actually, the amount of data you can get from a pit stop is huge. Similar to a race car, we've got 300 sensors that are throwing information at you more than the human brain can actually digest, process, and take action against. And we've only got milliseconds in this game, so time is precious. And I think we're at that space with pit stops now that there is so much information around that very short moment that actually we now rely on things like AI to interpret that and point out things like anomalies compared to a good pit stop and, angles at which the tire has approached the car as opposed to what normally that part of the crew might be doing and is considered good. The angle the driver comes into the box because there's a bit of flexibility as to the angle and speed. So we're analyzing all these things all the time. But what the team really want to see is an aggregation of that to say, what does good look like and where am I against good? Really, really simplify the science around the car and say, like, how do I get better and what are the things I need to work on the next pit stop?
I think you're describing something that even outside of race context, you talk to marketers, you talk to other people who collect tons and tons of data, and they're like, just give me a dashboard, give me a number, give me a direction that I need to go to make me or my team better. And so that feels relatable. But I'm wondering, is it relatable to you? Does it feel like you're striving towards something similar that any other team is doing? Or are there things that are unique to how you're thinking about data and the analysis of it that is only unique to McLaren or only unique to F1?
Yeah, first, I think that statement's true. Marketers are drowning in data and all they want to do is create actionable insight. And we're kind of in that same race. Where are we against our competitors? I think, you've got sporting, technical and financial regulations. Technology is almost this kind of unsung battleground that is going on between the teams because it is a kind of matter of win or lose if you've got good technology or not. And that can extend from traditional, infrastructure software applications, the way that you process information, all the way through to physical infrastructure like wind tunnel simulators. And although it's a very technical sport and the people that operate in the sport are incredibly intelligent, simplification of the scenario is also important for us as well. We get, 100,000 parameters of telemetry coming off the car per second,
wow,
which is a huge amount of data. Again, not that the human brain can process that, but we want to spot the anomalies in that information. And then as it comes upstream to the mission control that are looking at data in slower time and trying to understand what these trends are, they can then relay back to the track some action that says, hey, we're seeing a vibration through the car on turn 4. We need Lando to lift and coast a bit more through that corner. Will, can you tell him that? Will being his engineer. All Will say is, Lando, stay off turn 4. He doesn't need to know the reason for that action, right? That's our role as a technologist, is to take something that is not processable by the human and then turn that into something that is genuinely actionable and creates good outcomes in the race.
Well, and not only actionable, there's also a trust there. There's a trust, of course, between Lando and Will, but there's also a trust between Lando and the technology that is informing that decision and basically saying, here's what makes sense to do. How do you build up that trust that what the data is telling you, that what the tools are telling you is going to be in your best interest, is going to ultimately help you win a race?
Well, it's interesting. You're creating data from the inception of a car. So CFD, which is called computational fluid dynamics, is quite a complex term, but it's you're solving physics in a digital world. So it's a full digital twin of the car. and we are constantly experimenting and testing the aerodynamic flow around the car. CFD is kind of the first data point we get, and then we put a 60% version of the car in a wind tunnel. So that's the first physical representation we get of the performance of what the car is potentially capable of. By the time it gets to the track, it's gone through all of these different processes, including a simulator run from the drivers to get a representative view of, how quick could it be on track. Mm-hmm. We then go and dial the car in, which is about getting it set up in a way that is suitable to the track that we're taking it to. So we spend the practice sessions dialing the car in. But what we're looking at is the data we're now generating on track. How does that compare to all of those data points downstream from the point we designed the car, went, this thing could be really quick, to here it is now on track and ready to go racing? Like, have we recognized that performance? Everyone's looking at that data. They're obsessed by it. What's really interesting is the drivers have now become obsessed by their data. Mm-hmm. They're so curious about, I felt this thing in the car, like, what did that look like in my data? And the more they're interested in what does the technology tell them than just be told what to do, feels like a characteristic of a very successful driver in the sport.
Well, essentially, it sounds to me like what you're saying is the trust also comes from the fact that the drivers are partners in this. Whether it's an AI tool, whether it's some other analytics tool, they understand how it's arriving at that decision.
It's a good characterization, and they're part of the process of us improving those tools all the time as well. If they're not seeing something in the data they're really interested in, it's down to us to go and develop that quickly. Mm-hmm. We make a change to the F1 car every 15 minutes. We're constantly evolving our tool chain as well to make sure that it's not just suitable for the engineers, but also end users of that, the driver. And they trust that the engineer talking to them is looking at the information that they will only get to see in post-event, because obviously they're in a race car doing 300 kilometers per hour and pulling 5Gs.
As I hear you talk about how much data you're managing, is there a risk of having too much data? Like, how does the team know when to stop analyzing, stop collecting, and just start making decisions and trying to move forward?
Yeah, I don't think you can ever have too much data. It's really what you do with it. We generate 250 million data points per car per race weekend, which is something like 12 billion data points just from telemetry a year. Mm-hmm. And that's before you even consider the same amount of information, threefold, comes off of the model in the wind tunnel, and we're correlating all that information as well. It's really how we harness that information, weed out the stuff that's just noise, focus on the stuff that really matters, and again, simplify and distill that into information for the team and make it useful for their role.
I just want to take a step back for a second, because we're talking about lots of different areas where AI comes into the picture, where analysis comes into the picture, the sensors in different parts. Can you give me a visual sense of where all this tech is and where does AI live in the stack?
Yeah, I kind of split it into three main areas for us. One is business technology. Yes, we're a Formula One team, but we are also just an entity that turns up to work and we perform our daily duties. Therefore, how do we get more out of the individuals that work for the organization, not continue to grow and make the ship too big? And I think, AI plays a key role there, not to replace humans, but actually take the mundane and the laborious out of their role. We sort of say it's not labor replacement, it's laborious replacement. Because you want to free people up to be scientists, be engineers, be creative. That's where they're at their best. So that's kind of the business technology angle. We then have performance technology, which is this is our secret sauce. This is where we apply AI into the world of racing, designing the car, building it, and going racing. And that's the kind of, that's where the trade secrets live, but we apply AI in so many different ways and different dimensions there. And you can imagine all the information we're getting off the car. It's not just time series data, which is generated from telemetry. We also have video, we have photos, we have geometric data from the shape of the car itself. Mm-hmm. So all of that has the ability to train and inform models to ultimately help us make better decisions and also go faster. We had the commercial side of the business, so we serve a huge amount of fans. 500 million are kind of up for grabs inside the sport for us. And with Drive to Survive and Netflix, we are seeing, this massive boom in the US, and the segmentation of fans is changing overnight as well. So it's how do you service these people that are on different time zones, have different preferences, like to go to races, don't like to go to races, are interested in the technical side of the sport, are interested in the social side of the sport and the elegance and the trendy part of it. And we've got to service all different types of fans and in a tone of voice that they recognize and can resonate with. and equally use that to our effect to convert those fans as well, right? So I think it plays a huge role in that commercial engine, which is just growing tenfold. And that's a super exciting space. I think AI has the ability to write custom journeys and do things and provide offerings to people without the human involved. And that's just what we're going to need more and more of as the audience we're serving is continuing to grow.
One question that I have been fond of asking people on the show is, what problem was AI brought on to try and solve at McLaren? Is it as simple as just helping us win races, or is it maybe more nuanced or specific depending on where in the business we're talking about?
Yeah, like everything we do has to have some kind of direct or indirect impact to performance. Whether that's, finding lap time, or it's finding the things that facilitate lap time and making those better. So everything we do, we approach with purpose. And I'd say, we've approached AI very open-minded. We don't think that it solves all. We also know that, just because it's off the shelf doesn't mean that it's there to take all of our problems and remove them from our lives. There is, there's tuning, there's fine tuning to do. There's stuff that you can buy. There's other stuff that you should probably build bespoke until the technology catches up. And I think that's how we progress as a sport as well. We're very critical of the car and how do we make it go faster, and you can see the tangible effect of that. Similar with technology, we're always trying to, fail fast, use it, embrace it, but also think, how can you make this thing better and how do you make it work for us? And, things have stuck, some haven't, and they'll go on the back burner until either technology catches up or we think it's an area of focus.
Wondering if you have an example of that where something has stuck or something has landed and you've really heard the impact of that from, whether it's someone in the back office, whether it's an engineer, someone who's really been able to share like, hey, this really helped me do something I wasn't able to do before, or perform in a way that we weren't able to before.
Yeah, well, actually more on the commercial side, like generating the regular reports and sort of media outlets that are talking about McLaren, and equally some of the public information that's available. We'd have people in the team that we want to be interpreting that information. How do we react and respond to it? Actually, we need them spending time doing that rather than report creating all the time and sharing reports and building insight from the reports. And what we've been able to do is really sort of not only harness the data, but also the generative creation of those information packs that they're deployed to multiple people. And then they can go and spend more time and be more creative to go, well, what's this information actually telling me? Not just be there turning the handle and creating it. So, general feedback and anything we approach that's sort of had a very similar outcome is, wow, this has just saved me a lot of time and actually a lot of headache of the things I just do not enjoy doing in my job. So you're not only increasing satisfaction of role, you're also just increasing headspace. And that's a massive thing, especially in a sport where, headspace is super important to make good decisions. If you're on the pit wall and you haven't got headspace, it's really difficult in those moments to make millisecond decisions that can be the difference between winning and losing.
I want to zoom out a little bit and talk about on the racetrack. And before you mentioned that another kind of pillar within McLaren is designing the cars. And I was wondering, how would you describe a Formula One car? Like, what does it look like? What is it made of? What powers it? I think that'll maybe help lay the groundwork a little bit for how AI can help turn up the dial on all of those things.
Yeah. Well, how do I simplify something that's so complex? What a challenging question. I guess in simple terms, like it's made out of two materials. It's metallic and carbon. The mechanical side of the car under the hood is predominantly metal based, but then, the lightweight element of the car is all carbon fiber, which has the ability to, be put under load up to two tons and barely sweat. We always look in the sport for what we call downforce, which is the ability for aerodynamics to make the car hug the road. And if you look at something like aerospace, they're doing the same thing, but the opposite way around. We try to make something go down, they try to make something go up. So that's the best analogy in terms of how the science works. It's a single-seater, four-wheel car, a V6 hybrid engine that's 25% electrically harvested as well. And you'll see this, if you're ever watching on TV, you'll see the backlight flickering. That's the regeneration of electricity through the braking system. And what that's done is used to redeploy that energy at moments in the race where you're overtaking or you're defending, of course, as well. And then there's things of note on the car. There's the halo, which is the protective bit above the driver's head. The front wing and rear wing are difficult to miss because I saw the front and back of the car, and they really stand out. And actually, the way that teams design them are very different, so they can look very artistic, but obviously they have incredible aerodynamic effect as well. In this era of car, if you are a Formula One fan, everything was kind of driven by the rear wing, which is where the downforce would happen. So you're all about creating low pressure under the car and then high pressure over the rear wing, and the two things come together and you get downforce. Now they are more floor biased, so all of the forces happen through the floor of the car. So that's why you'll see that the bodywork is so complex and the rear of the car is so intricate. And the reason for that is because we're trying to harness the airflow through those areas to generate more points of downforce. So hopefully that's a good explanation. If people can turn that into a visual, I'd like to see some sketches of people that have never seen a Formula One car, but that's the best you're going to get from me.
I think that is fantastic. And I think hearing you describe all of the pieces that go into that, I think the real point that I want people to get across is just, if you imagine the car that people are driving around in their daily lives, what you are working on and what your team is working on is just like an order of magnitude of complexity greater than probably anything they've encountered in their lives.
Yeah, I guess imagine having your road car and then somebody telling you that throughout the course of the year, you've got to change 90% of the components as well to keep it running and make it even more performant. Like that's the rate of innovation that we're having to operate within.
Has that always been the case, that cars go through that much of a dramatic transformation over the course of a season? Or is this something that is maybe more recent or more modern, or perhaps has been accelerated because of some of the tools that you have available to you?
I think accelerated is probably a good word for it. There's always been change in the sport and, people trying to interpret the regulations in a way that say, we want to do something quite clever with the car. And you've seen that through history. So much that cars actually look fundamentally different between competitors, but as the seasons go on, they kind of converge towards a certain style. And that's because perhaps, one team has understood the regulations better and learned how to extract some performance from the car. But I think, the evolution of technology, the evolution of the tools, although you're restricted to the amount of use you can use of things like your wind tunnel and CFD, there is so much evolution and innovation in those spaces that you can develop the car quicker and therefore can evolve it more, substantially through the course of the year. But you've got to also spend your dollars wisely. You can't be frivolous. You've got to be like, we're gonna deliver an upgrade and we're gonna do it at a very intended part in the season, and that's part of your upgrade strategy to remain performant on track.
And I'm wondering if you can elaborate a little bit on where AI comes into the mix here. I mean, how would your engineers be using machine learning to help throughout the season?
Yeah, so as I said, we're doing lots of mini experiments all the time. So, you're getting data off things like the wind tunnel model. You want to experiment, what if you made a small change in the physical world? How would that potentially impact downward flow of air through the rest of the car? We also run a whole bunch of setup simulations before we even go into the race weekend. So something like 350 million different permutations of how not only the car setup, but how the race may game out as well. So we're putting a lot of compute and simulation power into here's all the data we know about from previous years, but also what we know the car has the potential to deliver on track, and therefore informs things like setups for the weekend before we go into qualifying and race. The term you'll hear a lot is parc fermé, which is when the car is locked spec-wise for the rest of the weekend. So you've got kind of this deadline point of we need the car set up in a certain way that not only can we do a one-lap good pace for qualifying and shoot for pole, but also we want that car to be performant when we go and race 58 laps around the track. So yeah, it's a real balancing game, but AI plays a huge role in we don't actually get a lot of time to make all those decisions, right? Something goes in the wind tunnel, we want to move quickly to how do we get on to manufacturing and producing it. We want to be really confident. Therefore, aggregating all that information to are we confident in the result is super important. Equally correlating it downstream as it goes through the rest of the process, you always want that confidence check. And again, you get out what you put in, and therefore we give more freedom for designers, aerodynamicists to have more creative mind space and develop things that are going to have a direct impact on performance.
Working Smarter is powered by Dropbox Dash, and it also powers the McLaren F1 Racing Team. Dash is a tool that combines AI universal search and knowledge management with in-depth content access control. You can use it to search across files, images, videos, and more, then draft, summarize, and organize your work all from one place. I asked Dan to tell me why he likes Dash, and this is what he had to say.
I think there's two components. One is that it's agnostic to the enterprise, rather than getting locked into a single ecosystem, we've got multiple other technology partners, as well as just an array of business, performance, and commercial technologies, and therefore people align to using different tech because of the arenas they work in. Something like Dropbox Dash allows you to connect into all of those data sources and get a single view. My personal view, because there's not a product on the market like that at the moment, which allows you to give you that single federated view of everything that's going on. And then that means that I can work in order the things that I'm interested in. I can find the things that I know is relevant to a project, that we might be working on. Not only can people go and find the thing, which they've probably forgotten where they've stored it and where it is in the ecosystem, it also helps people arrange and organize their work so we can kind of pull projects together without having to physically move information. And you can ask natural language questions as well as ask it to create content for you against that information. The other component of Dash is the security element. It can pull in all of the permission sets that people have got across information, as well as what you potentially have shared publicly and you've left that open. So it's almost like exposure management. What's the IP that may have been shared with good intention to, let's say, a creative supplier, and you never shut that access off, and you may have parted ways with that relationship, and now they've still got persistent access. So Dropbox Dash does a really great job of going, who has access to your ecosystem still, and how do you want to perhaps go and lock that down and control it, which is a great kind of addition to using the product and all the connectors that it has to date.
Find out how Dash can help you score your own wins at work. Head to workingsmarter.ai/dash or tap the link in the show notes. Earlier, you had mentioned how AI factors quite a bit into some of the back office work, the kind of commercial side of the business. And I'd love to talk a little bit more about that. I'm wondering if you remember, you personally, like when did you first start using AI in your own work?
I guess I was exposed to it early in sort of more traditional machine learning. I think that's been in the sport for a long time, which is why when this kind of boom has happened, we're not late to the game, because actually we've been doing that already for the last 10 years. This is just the next wave. And all we've done is embrace those tools to go, well, how do they just add the turbo to the existing engine that we've got? Not kind of start from base zero, which is where I know a lot of organizations are starting. And then normally comes from top down that, every CEO says, we need an AI strategy, because that's what all the other CEOs are talking about. So I get the sort of the strain and pressure people are under. And, look, like large language models, probably in the last 18 months where they're like super compelling, and it's like what you put in, it interprets it really well and it gives you an incredible answer. I've seen versions of those probably sort of 4 or 5 years ago that have been built in-house, models that we've developed ourselves. But some of these large language models are incredible.
Can you tell me more about some of those workflows? I'm curious about how that's actually looked for some of the folks who are using this in McLaren right now.
Yeah, this can be simple. This can be like, a new starter joins the business and you want a common experience for all of those people. And therefore you're harnessing the point at which the employee ID is created and saying, well, how do you make sure that that process is repeatable and it's not hand cranked by someone like an HR administrator? And equally with reporting, reporting's super important to be consistent, and therefore we're not making mistakes when we're actioning things off the back of reports. So again, taking that out of people like the finance team's life, again, is really important. And scraping information from public sources. There's a lot of information about McLaren out there and we want to know what's going on everywhere. And therefore we trust an AI engine to go and find that, as opposed to someone surfing the web all day to a point where that data's almost become irrelevant, because by the time you've got it, it's like, well, it's old news. These are small things, but actually they amount to so much, and they amount to a lot of time as well. Time's an equal commodity. It's very precious.
A thing I was thinking about earlier when we were talking about how the drivers and the other members of the team, they've learned to kind of build up this trust in the technology because they also kind of understand why it's making its recommendations. Can you remember a time where maybe the data was telling you one thing, but your gut, the team's intuition was saying something else, and ultimately the human side was right?
Oh, wow. I think there's actually times where it's the other way around, that the gut and intuition was telling us, for example, stay out. And the data may have said you should be pitting here and changing tyre, maybe when some rain was falling and a certain driver in a certain country, but I won't go into too much detail on it. But, we have had moments like that where, the data will be telling us, there's a 92% probability of something, and naturally that should encourage you to pit, even if your competitor doesn't pit. And we've chosen not to do that because we use gut and intuition, and actually the data was right. And in hindsight, we should have followed the model. We have moments like that, but they're always good opportunities to learn, good opportunities to refocus. And actually, just weirdly, if you make a decision against the machine and it was telling you the right thing, then all it does is build longer term trust in the data. And that's why I said, drivers have kind of become an extension to the engineering team, because they get out of the car and the first thing they're like, is like, show me my data, show me my data.
What parts of F1 racing in the future do you think still have the greatest potential to be shaped by AI or influenced by AI?
There's a lot of unseen things, like, manufacturing is a big part of what we do. Building these cars at pace is tricky. And also, there's a huge amount of ability to innovate in that space. It's used a lot across a number of industries. I think there's a lot of learning to be taken. You take the uniqueness of Formula One out of it and you go, actually, there's a huge amount of advancement that can be made in manufacturing. I think that tees up well for things like, repurposing material and circular car and all of that. I think there's a huge amount of opportunity with Formula One's target around net zero in 2040 as well. So that's an area that excites me, and I think is creating a lot more conversation of, well, if you can get telemetry of a car and you can make good decisions, like, let's do more of that in manufacturing, because we can deploy labor in a much better way. We can automate processes a lot better. And that's I think almost it's a core part of our business, but actually I think if you can deliver concept to value quicker, and the thing that's in there and the bottleneck is building the thing, like, I think that's just going to mean you're going to see more innovation on the track quicker, and ultimately it's just going to make for good racing, because people have got new tools every week that they want to deploy on track, and we'll see some pretty awesome wheel-to-wheel racing in the future.
Given that behind everything we're talking about is an organization that's built to race really fast, really cutting-edge cars, I'm curious, how do you think McLaren's focus on speed and winning can help others think about how they can turbocharge the work that they do with AI?
Well, I have this conversation with technology leaders all the time around, they say we've got all these business imperatives and objectives and just don't know how to ladder up our strategy towards it. We oversimplify what our objective is, and that's just to go and win. And what we do is we pile all of our resources and all of our roadmaps into that one thing. Yeah. The way we run the business is more complex. We do have objectives that sit below that. But if you start to obsess over the one thing and something that's quite tangible, which is like, we're going to go win races, everything just falls into place. And I encourage, when I speak to technology leaders or others in other organizations, they're like, we're just a little bit lost our way. It's like, forget the 10 imperatives of the business. Like, what's the one thing that you just really want to obsess over? And suddenly things start to become a lot clearer for them, because they know that that's what they're ultimately needing to contribute to, not the layer below it. And that's just, that's typical advice I always like to offer.
It sounds notable too, because it's the advice is not, go out and throw AI at whatever problems you have. It's think about the problems you have and kind of decide what needs to flow out from there.
Yeah, it's very easy to be solution-led, especially in a world where there's so many technology platforms available to you. You can easily get hooked on one. For me, I'm, what do we need to do to firstly understand that problem and measure it? And then how do we deploy a solution towards it and ultimately be able to measure it again? And that's very sort of simple problem statement and solving methodology. But actually, if you take that approach and everything, a bit like we do with the race car, like, we see a problem or something that's just not quite performing, we'll measure it through the data that we're getting off the car. We'll go, here's our baseline. We'll then go and find some kind of solution to go and solve it. And then ultimately we get to measure it again. We need to be a more problem-led industry than solution-led.
Given all of your reliance on machine learning, all the AI tools that are in F1 racing today, why are humans never going to be replaceable in the work that you do?
I think, a lot of it is around the human factor of the driver. The sport isn't what it is without the humans involved, and I think that will ring true for, in my view, forever. But it will always advance the technology and the tools you give them in order to go racing. And I think that's where the entertainment, the excitement happens. And we always want a level of uncertainty in this sport. That's what, as fans, we get out of bed for and, watch the racing. And I think, everybody wants to be an engineer or a scientist, and what better way to take the administrative part out of your life and just focus on being an engineer and a scientist. And that's very relevant in our sport. So, we'll continue to double down in that space where it's not labor replacement, laborious replacement. And I think that's just going to continue to unlock time and effort in our engineering community that will deliver more points of downforce to the car and hopefully more championships to come in the future.
To bring it back around, full circle, going back to that Qatar race and the world record pit stop, how did the race end for Lando Norris?
How did the race end for Lando? I actually don't know what the result was in Qatar. I was so focused on being like, is there a Guinness World Record guy going to turn up and give us an award here? But that was 2023.
Did he?
He did. He came to the factory. Having watched that as a kid as well, like it was quite funny seeing like a Guinness World Record person in the suit with the with the trophy. That was quite cool. But Qatar 23. How do I not know the end of that race? It was good for us because we got world record. Obviously,
of course,
we'll always take that. The one that where it came down to win or lose on a pit stop as well. The last race of 2024, when the championship was up for grabs, we only won the championship by 2% in terms of points, and that came down to the last pit stop, which was a 2-second flat pit stop for Lando. He had to win the race really for us to secure the championship, and 2-second pit stops they don't just come for free. There's a lot of effort that goes into that. If it was something like 3.4 seconds, I think we would have been right on the edge of our seats and we would have seen some really close racing with the guys behind us. So it just shows when we say it's milliseconds between win or lose, like there is no better example than doing something that was only 0.2 off of a world record to secure the world championship in 2024.
I think that's a good place to leave it, Dan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Appreciate it.
So Lando Norris didn't win that race in Qatar. He finished third, which is still a great result, especially considering he started in 10th place. It took more than that world record pit stop to get him to the podium, but that brilliant execution certainly helped. It's an example of what's possible when everyone is dialed in, every system is optimized, and every millisecond is counted. What Dan and his technology team also show us is that AI's role doesn't guarantee wins, but it can narrow the playing field between really good and really great. Now, maybe that's all you need in your own work. An edge to reach that finish line a little faster. As Dan put it, AI isn't labor replacement, but laborious replacement. For McLaren, working smarter means not handing the wheel to AI, but using it to help you drive better. Working Smarter is brought to you by Dropbox Dash, the universal search and knowledge management tool from Dropbox. Find anything and protect everything with Dropbox Dash. Find more episodes of Working Smarter on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And find more interviews like this one on our website, workingsmarter.ai. The show couldn't get across the finish line without the pit crew at Cosmic Standard, producer Dominic Girard, sound engineer Asia Simpson, technical director Jacob Winnick, and executive producer Eliza Smith. Special thanks to our illustrators, Fanny Lohr and Justin Tran, and to Katie Keck for editorial support. Our theme song was composed by Doug Stewart, and I'm Matthew Braga. Thanks for listening.